Maybe we can just start by what prompted you to submit an application last summer when we were putting the call out for Ambassadors of Hope?
Sure. I'm going to have to get used to using this. Let me know if it's okay.
You're good.
All right. When I first saw the advertisement, I read it, and I really believed in the message of hope, as well as with my experience. It was my brother who was a patient here, and it was maybe about 12, 13 years ago that he started going through his illness. And at the time, there weren't really a lot of stories or positive stories out there about people living with mental illness, and especially with schizophrenia or psychosis. And I think it would have been helpful at that time for my family, my parents or my other brother or myself, to hear some positive stories of people who received treatment, received like proper treatment, medication, good support system, and then they were able to have a fulfilling life. I know at the time we didn't have Google, and just trying to find information, it was really hard to just hear positive stories. So when I saw the ad for it, and I heard that we would be speaking about hope and sharing our stories, I just thought it would be a really good way of sharing my story and somewhat of my brother's story, which to me is a really successful and positive story, to kind of get it out there to other families who might be going through something similar.
So you're talking about a decade plus ago when your family's maybe first going through this. And on the outside, I remember what mental health was like 10, 15 years ago, where it wasn't nearly the talking point that it is now. Still, there's still stigma that exists, but back then I think it was even more so. Can you kind of describe what it was like going through that as a family when your loved one is diagnosed with something as a word as terrifying as schizophrenia, and what that was like for your whole family?
I can break it down into little pieces. For me, at the time, I was actually in university when he was diagnosed and going through the psychosis, and then I think it took some time before the diagnosis actually happened. So I had an interest in taking some psychology courses and even sociology courses that had to do with mental illness and different things. And I know I'd be sitting in the class, and they'd be, the professors and other students would be talking very negatively about mental illness and then schizophrenia. I think at that time there was some stuff in the media, maybe somebody who had schizophrenia had done something, and there was so much negative talk, and basically somebody gets diagnosed with this and they either they get institutionalized or live on the street. There was no positive story, and so I'd be sitting in class and I'd have to hear that, and it would be hard to kind of bite my tongue. I'd have to bite my tongue. So there would be that piece, and then also I was trying to kind of figure out maybe why this happened and that sort of thing. And as I'd be attending trying to find meetings or even just something to get information, it seemed like everything I was finding, it was like people who were diagnosed with something like schizophrenia or depression suffered a great trauma when they were children. It just seemed like all the stories out there had to do with people having really bad childhoods or some great trauma. And so that, I think, kind of made the stigma, for me, greater from then saying, hey, look, my brother has schizophrenia, because then it's how are people going to judge me and my family? Because I had a really good childhood, but then everything that was out there was saying, no, only people that suffer this great trauma have mental illness. Which I'm sure is a case in some situations, but that's just all I was finding. So there were those things for me that kind of held me back from myself trying to share with people. I think Like, I know for my parents, like one story that comes to mind for my mom, like my parents continued working as they were going through everything. And even as recent as a few years ago, when people that my mom works with knew about my brother and everything that she's had to go with, at Halloween, they decide as a great team building exercise that they were going to dress the office as like a mental institution. Like everybody would come in wearing straitjackets, and that would be like a great costume. And obviously that would be really upsetting for my mom, and that was only a few years ago. So there are things like that, and family members perhaps not understanding. A lot of people making comments, especially when Sean was more, I guess, or my brother was more disruptive, I guess, like during the psychosis period, people just saying, well, just kick him out, right? Like, why are you having him stay in the home? Just kind of kick him out, that sort of thing. And family members and friends perhaps not understanding kind of why you stick by with a family member who's going through something like this. And I think part of my brother's success in how over, like you said, 10, 12 years, why he's gotten to the place that he is because my parents were so supportive. He stayed in the home, and my parents didn't kick him out. But a lot of family members didn't really stick by, because after years of going through things, they were like, well, you didn't kick him out, so, you know.
When you're going through that as a family, I imagine it's very isolating, people pulling away from you. What kind of toll did it have on you and your family, your parents, when you're, like, it's not uncommon for families that are giving so much, right? Their patients are exhausted, I'm sure. It starts to impact their own mental health. Like, what kind of impact did it have on your family unit?
Well, a lot. I think it's so hard to pinpoint and like describe. It impacts everything. Now that I'm a mother myself, I commend my parents for actually being able to focus on other things when that was going on, because they still had me and my other brother to look after, and working and everything else. And I was thinking about it this morning about what would I do in that situation, and it's definitely hard, but I think my parents still tried to continue to have a normal, like, regular household, like, regular food and groceries and all that kind of stuff. But it definitely takes a toll on your mental health. Like, I know coming back from school, there was a period where I didn't see my parents for a couple of weeks, and I remember my dad picking me up at the GO station, and he just looked like he had aged like 5 years in a few weeks, and then going home and seeing my mom, and I'm like, they had aged so much in a short period of time, just didn't look well, and it was probably from the stress of not knowing what to do. And then my younger brother, too, there's a 5-year gap between my youngest brother, and he started to act out a little bit, I'm sure, for attention and different things. So, it takes a toll on the family for sure.
Not unlike a lot of illnesses, right? It's just maybe this, people don't give it the, I don't know if attention is the right word, but they don't realize that it's, such a critical illness and the long-term impact that it has on your family. No.
Often during that period, I would think to myself, if my brother was diagnosed with cancer, we'd have people probably coming to the door and offering help or dropping off like casserole or wanting to talk. But because it was mental health, people didn't want to go there. Or if you did talk about it, it was almost like, why are you sharing this? It's something that we don't talk about.
I mean, people would probably just shut down, I'm guessing, right? Like as soon as you were to mention it, or that uncomfortable silence, like, let's talk about the weather or something like that?
Yeah, they didn't want to go there at all. Like, I know I had quite a few friends at that time, and they just wanted to talk about fun things. I was invited to a cottage with a bunch of people. And I remember that weekend I just wanted to like sleep and read and not do what everybody else was doing, like have fun and everything. I just wanted to relax, and nobody could really understand that. And they didn't want to hear about what was going on.
So with your brother's journey, obviously with schizophrenia, it's something you're dealing with for life, but he seems to be doing quite well now. Can you talk about his journey and what has made a difference for him?
Yeah, to me, he is doing very well, and it very successful. Like, when I look back on where I thought he would be 10 years ago, to me, he's doing exceptional. The first few years were a bit rough, actually getting a diagnosis. I think it took until he came here for an accurate diagnosis and treatment, and then kind of getting on the right medication. But we've seen, like, with him taking his medication regularly and sleeping regularly and eating healthy, he's able to do so much. Like, he wasn't able to complete high school at the time, but he's since continued, he's finished all of his courses and able to achieve like his high school credits. He actually did get into Durham College for a program and attended for a few weeks, but it didn't work out for different things, because I don't think he wanted to put his hand up and identify himself in different supports. So, but at least he tried. Like, he got in, and at least he tried to do that. He got his license, and he's really proud of that, and got his own car. So he's doing really well. I look at it kind of like it ebbs and it flows. Maybe about 2.5 years ago, he thought he didn't need to take his medication. So he did have a bit of a relapse where he had to come back here. And actually that period was quite stressful, because my dad had a heart attack at the time as well. But I will say the ACT team was so helpful during that period, because my parents weren't really able to take care of Sean that much. Like, he was here, and then once he was stable enough to come home, it was the ACT team who really helped as far as making sure he was getting his medication and coming in for his blood work, and if he needed to go to the bank or whatever, they were able to help that way, because my parents weren't able to do it at that time.
Must have been an adjustment for everybody in your family when your brother is used to having a certain level of support, whether it's from your parents or yourself or your other brother, and then having to have it, from somebody else. Have you seen in that period like growth in him, like when he's been more involved with the ACT team, like in terms of his recovery or his ability to live his life?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, like, to me, he's. I don't know if he'll ever get to the point where he's living on his own. I don't know if that's what you mean, like going out and different things. But I look at it that he's still able to get up in the morning at like 8 o'clock in the morning. He's not sleeping until like 1 o'clock. To me, that's successful that he's able to do that and make his own breakfast and clean up after himself. And when people come around, he's engaging with them and talking with them. Because before, when there would be family get-togethers or different things, he wouldn't really socialize. But like when my son comes over, he's very engaging with him and playing and doing Lego and different things, and not necessarily kind of up in his room all the time. He's out like driving his car and getting together. He has a friend that he met while he was here, and they've been friends over, I guess, 10 plus years. So getting together with him and that sort of thing.
How has whether it's perception or your relationship with other people changed since kind of mental health has become a little bit more common to talk about, right? We've seen the Bell Let's Talk, we've seen people share their story. Although schizophrenia is still heavily stigmatized, even above other mental health issues, but have you been able to talk more with your family, your extended family, about what your brother deals with? Have people been more open to having conversations in the last few years?
I think for sure. There are certain family members who've had their own mental health struggle, and I think they're more open to kind of coming to us and talking about different things. Friends of mine who maybe are having difficulty, they know they can come to me and I'll be empathetic to their situation. I definitely don't know exactly how they're feeling, but I still empathize and try to support them that way. In my job, I work in human resources, so I found it really helpful in HR where if there's employees that are struggling, often the first time you can see it is with their attendance starts to go down or their sick time. And so I find in my job I'm able to have open conversations with people and non-judgmental. When they identify that maybe they have a child who's going through something similar and they're struggling, I'm able to empathize with them and talk about it. So I found at work, people tend to come to me a bit more.
And you work at, and I didn't mention this off the top, but you work at the Durham Regional Police Service in human resources, and we talk about stigma. I would imagine that's traditionally a place where employees would not be necessarily open about talking about their feelings or about what they're going through. Have you seen a change in your work life as to how people approach mental health issues?
I think the police service is a little bit behind, in as far as the openness, but I think it's it's getting there. There's a lot of work that we're doing is to reduce the stigma, but I think one thing that's hard is that we, as a society, we expect police officers to be strong and invincible and not be affected by anything. So we kind of put the stigma on them, society puts a stigma on them that they shouldn't feel a certain way and different things. But what I do is I try, when I'm having one-on-one conversations with people, or when I know there's been a really bad call, I think it was last year when there was a fire in Oshawa and some children and their mom were stuck there. It's in the media a lot. I went to the Oshawa division that day, and I kind of just walked around with the EFAP pamphlets in my pocket and talking about our psychology benefits and just being really open about, I've taken the mental health first aid, and not that I'm a clinician or anything, but just trying to have conversations with people. It's a really good idea to eat something healthy today. Just don't kind of take care of yourself, and if you're not feeling well tomorrow, here's some numbers that you can call, that sort of thing. I think we need to do baby steps, but it's definitely interesting working in a police service, but we're doing lots of really good work, so hopefully we get there in time.
When you're in a situation like that where you're reaching out, whether, we mentioned going to Oshawa Division and handing out pamphlets or just being, somebody to listen, is that experience or memory of what it was like for you in university or at that cottage, is that with you at all times? Where you remember what it's like to feel alone or to feel necessarily close off from people?
I guess so. I never really thought about it, but perhaps that's what kind of drives me for it, is that I don't want people to feel alone and to feel isolated, that I want them to feel that it's okay to get help, or it's okay not to feel okay.
So fast forwarding to October when we announced the Ambassadors of Hope, and we had an event here, and it was on social media. I'm sure family and friends saw that you were one of the 6 people selected. What was the reaction from people in your family and your inner circle at work? Like, what was the overall sentiment?
It was really, really positive. I didn't really make a big deal about it beforehand and tell like a lot of people or anything. But when all the pictures started to go out on social media, I know my parents were very proud. Even my brother, I think, is quite proud. Different family members, when they saw it, they were reaching out to me and talking about their own struggles that they were going through. And friends, I know at work, they reached out to me to write an article for like our employee newsletter. And so I've had different people reaching out to me, just sharing their own experience, which has been really great. Everybody's been really positive about it.
When you go through this, the next few months as we celebrate the 100th anniversary, what do you hope people kind of take away from the whole experience, whether it's an interaction they have with you at an event like this or others? What do you hope people, what message do you hope to deliver to people?
Just perhaps that maybe, for me, the most important thing that I wish I knew back then is kind of like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think when you're going through something difficult, it's hard to kind of see past that. And so I hope that my story and my brother's story is sort of that message of hope, that while some people might be struggling right now, that with the right treatment, whatever that is, if it's medication, therapy, both, whatever it is, that people can still have a happy, healthy life.
Well, thank you very much for doing this today and for all the work you're doing with the Ambassadors of Hope. And I think one of the things in Ontario Shores that we appreciate all the stories that we hear from people who have been impacted by mental illness, but I think we can all relate, especially to the family story. And I think that's actually a message that we don't get out enough, is the impact that it, obviously what your brother's going through that whole time, is very difficult for him, but it's the whole family's impacted and how it kind of shapes your own lives. So we appreciate you telling that story. Thank you very much.